welcome everyone. My name is Colleen Perry, and this is a program that is part of GSU's Global Careers Expo. Before we get started, I just want to point out that I have a support with me here today. Caroline Gilling is here, and so if you can see her in chat, if there's a question that comes up and you can't get my attention, please feel free to chat with her if you have any questions or would like to share anything or just want to ask her something. So we have a lot to cover in an hour. We will be doing this, keeping right to the hour. We will try to close right at about 5 of, for those of you who have a 2 o'clock session that you want to get to. We want to make sure that you're able to attend as many of those sessions today as possible. So on behalf of, I have a little bit of a script to read. Hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm reading too much. But on behalf of the Atlanta Global Studies Center, the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies, and the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research, we all have such short names to our offices. We'd like to welcome you to the GSU Global Careers Expo 2020, first time that it's been done virtually as part of the International Education Week. This event brings together organizations focused on global issues, helping to build relationships globally. The goal today is for these organizations to share the rewarding opportunities within their orgs in global confidence, or the ability to work and communicate with diverse groups of people and to adapt to new and changing environments is an important and desirable skill for each of the organizations that are profiled here today. So as a side note, if you want to strengthen your global competence and add this really critical skill set to your resume, follow the QR code on the screen to learn about the Global Scholars Distinction that is awarded to at graduation to students who have completed 5 Global Scholars courses. So that's the Global Scholars Distinction that you would earn as you graduate if you completed those courses. So if you use the QR code, if you scan that on your phone, it should take you to more information. Now, let's get to the main reason that you came into this session. You've joined us this afternoon. Allow me to introduce our speaker. Mr. Alan DeBose is from the U.S. Department of State. He is here today to talk to us about the important work being done at the State Department and to share the many pathways into this large federal agency. Alan joined the U.S. Foreign Service as a management officer. I'm sorry, I missed the first sentence, Alan. Alan is the U.S. Department of State, is the U.S. Department of State diplomat in residence, and he is based here in Atlanta. He joined the U.S. Foreign Service as a management officer in 2005 after working in the private sector for more than 17 years. Alan served abroad in Mexico, Ecuador, and the U.S. Arab Emirates, and has also served domestically in assignments where he traveled extensively through Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East. And now I'm going to turn it over to Alan, and as you get started, I will unshare my PowerPoint and share yours.
I have to remember to unmute myself. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. And as you get organized, if we can go to the first screen of the PowerPoint, then I'll just start talking. But basically, I'm glad that I have a chance to talk about the Department of State and U.S. Foreign Service today. I think this whole presentation will be about 25 minutes, and then we can go to questions. But of course, if you have a question and you don't want to forget it or something like that, just put it in chat. We'll make sure that we'll double back and answer that question. And with that said, I see the first slide is up, so I will start my presentation. One thing I do want to mention as we go is that you're going to hear me mention a few things over and over, so please check the chat from time to time because we'll be putting links in that will help you identify exactly what I'm talking about. If you look down the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you see careers.state.gov. And you'll hear me repeat that over and over and over. It's actually a very, very good site. It provides a lot of information. It's a bit deceptive because you have to click and it'll lead to something else, and you click there and it leads to something else. So please make sure as you want to gather more information, you start at careers.state.gov. Next slide, please. So again, my name is Alan Dubose. I'm the diplomat in residence for the U.S. Department of State. I can be contacted at dirsouth@state.gov. What we're going to talk about today is the U.S. Department of State's role, why join the Foreign Service, what are the careers and their paths, and what are some of our student programs. And you look to the left and you see this old ad. This is from a newspaper. Newspapers much anymore. Back at 2004, I saw this ad, and when I took this job right here, I said, can you find that ad? Because I want people to see the reason I ended up joining the Foreign Service. I came across this ad right here, and Secretary of State Colin Powell at the time said, we're looking for administrators. And I thought, I'm an administrator. I'd heard of the Foreign Service, but I always thought of the Foreign Service looking for lawyers or political people, and that's really not me. But I went to careers.state.gov, and that same day made the decision to start pursuing a career in the U.S. Foreign Service. Next slide, please. So what is the mission of the State Department? The answer is that the U.S. Department of State leads America's foreign policy overseas. That's the bottom line, that we are the agency that coordinates all foreign affairs agencies overseas. So we speak for the White House or any other official capacity for the U.S. government abroad. Next slide, please. So the Department of State is actually the oldest U.S. agency, federal agency. It was started in 1789, but the Foreign Service was cobbled together from the State Department in 1904. All they did is take all the function within the Department of State and made it into a Foreign Service. So within the service, we have our civil service, and we also have our foreign service, and we are on different career paths and requirements and expectations. But the Foreign Service is part of the U.S. Department of State. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., and we have special purpose offices spread throughout the U.S. Special purpose might be a passport agency, or maybe an Office of Foreign Missions, which is basically one of our offices that deals with consulates abroad, so who are abroad themselves. So for example, down in Miami, we'll have a foreign mission office, and they are supporting all the consulates from Latin America that might be in Miami. As far as our own Foreign Service posts, we have 276 posts spread across 101 countries. And if you look down at the very bottom, the U.S. Department of State has 77,000 employees, but only 14,000 are actually Foreign Service employees. We have about 10,000 civil service employees back mostly in the DC area who are supporting the Foreign Service, and the bulk of our employees are actually the 50,000 locally employed staff. These are people who are hired by the embassy or consulate abroad. They may be Americans, they may not be Americans, they do have to get certain levels of clearance. They're critically important to our success because they are our institutional knowledge, and also they pretty much show us around. They know the ropes within that country. We are kind of like the military. Every 2 to 3 years, we're rotating in and rotating out. So the people who tell us everything from where the bathroom is to who we need to talk to at the higher levels of government are really our locally employed staff. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through this. Really, I just wanted you to know this is a snapshot in time. If I updated it, it probably changed. We do whatever is important to the U.S. government abroad. So this is a snapshot of our policy issues that include things like cyber issues, human trafficking, climate and environment. Some of those you recognize, some you would think, the Foreign Service is involved in cyber issues. Well, whatever's important to the U.S. government is important to us if it's dealing with overseas. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the careers and the paths. And essentially, we're going to talk about the 2 broad paths and then drill down a little bit into the details of each. We essentially have 2 paths to being in the Foreign Service. One is a Foreign Service officer and the other is a specialist. You'll hear the term officer interchanged with the term generalist a lot. And the reason will become obvious as we talk. Next slide, please. So Foreign Service Officers, or FSOs, are generalists, and they're required to serve in different roles throughout their careers in the 5 career tracks. So basically what that's saying is there are only 5 job options for Foreign Service Officers. We'll talk about those, but they're required to serve in those other roles as well. So I am a Foreign Service Management Officer, career track management, but I'm required to do at least a quarter of my career working in other roles like consular work or human resources, something other than management. And the reason is because the Foreign Service officers tend to be where the ranks of our personnel who are level are. So for example, an ambassador or deputy secretary, the career people work their way up, and as they work their way up, supervisory and leadership responsibility is very, very important to us. So it's a lot easier to supervise large numbers of people if you know something about their work. So that's why we want our generalists to be broader, because we want them to know as much as they can about the people they'll be supervising. We contrast that with our Foreign Service specialists, who are subject matter experts. So when they join, they have to enter with a certain level of expertise, and then they're going to be doing that throughout their career. So they are Foreign Service, no different. The difference is they're expected to work within their skill set through their entire career, whereas the generals are required to work outside their skill set at least a quarter of their career. Next slide, please. So we talked about the Foreign Service officers, and I said there are only 5 careers, and this is it. They're consular, economic, management, political, and public diplomacy. So quickly, so you understand what they are. Consular really has 2 major roles. Their major roles are to take care of US citizens abroad. So if an American's abroad, something happens, like let's say their passport is stolen and they need help, chances are the person they're going to talk to is a consular officer. The other major function of consular officers are to deal with local people who are trying to enter the US. So when someone wants to enter the US, let's say a student wants to attend Georgia State, but they're from another country, they would have to go get a student visa, and they would do that by talking to a consular officer, making their application, hopefully getting it approved, and that's how they're allowed to enter the US. I'll skip over to management. Management is what I am, and again, management is the closest thing to actually the private sector. We're an administrative support role, so everything from, let's say, facility management, IT, human resources, finance, even our medical clinics, the doctors and nurse practitioners we have, they fall under the management umbrella. In an embassy, usually the management office is the largest one. When I was in Dubai, I think I had 77 people reporting to me. And that was because we're dealing with such broad responsibility for being the catch-all within the organization. I'll go down to diplomacy and say our P office, these are the face of the State Department. These are the people who deal with the social media, deal with the journalists, project information out about us, to write information. These are the publicists for us. Now, I saved economic and political for last because I always tell everybody they're pretty much the same job. They're what we call reporting officers. And reporting officers are people who gather information, share that information back with Washington. So economic officers are gathering economic information. Political officers, political information. I have never met someone who did a 15 or 20-year career as an economic officer who didn't do at least one tour as political, and vice versa. Now, they are also the people who are dealing with the most, so they many times share information. If there comes a time when the US government wants to communicate with the local government, it's usually going to be an economic or political officer who's going to deliver that message. Next slide, please. So I just said to you that we only have 5 jobs, 5 careers for our generalists. So how do we measure people as far as candidates if there are only 5 careers? No one's ever majored in consular as far as I know. So you can major in biology, you can major in whatever, and still compete for one of those 5 careers. And the measuring stick that would be used through the process are what we call these 13 dimensions. And basically, we're looking for these characteristics. And those candidates who are able to demonstrate high competency in all 13 of these dimensions are the ones who tend to succeed, tend to be chosen to join the U.S. Foreign Service. Now, there is none that is considered superior to the others, but my experience taught me that judgment is probably the umbrella for all of them, because no matter how you are in any of these categories, there's always going to be gray area, and using good judgment is very important. I'll also mention that cultural adaptability is basically how do you perform when you're put in an environment that's different. It doesn't always mean another country, but anytime you're put in some where you've never been there before, you don't know how they do it there, are you going to crash and burn, or are you going to adjust? So that's what we call cultural adaptability, and that's something that's very, very important to us. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about Foreign Service Specialists. So we talked about the officers or the generalists. Now we're talking about the specialist career tracks, and they are administrative, construction engineering, someone has to build the embassies, facility management, someone has to take care of those industries, information technology, kind of for itself with the catch. We're not necessarily looking for people who are hands-on IT coders or something like that, because it costs Uncle Sam somewhere around $700,000, $750,000 on an average for a 3-year tour to send one of our people abroad. So these IT personnel we have are going to be supervising on their first tour. They're going to be supervising local staff. So our IT people need to understand the IT and be good enough at it, but they also have to be able to A, supervise staff, and B, communicate. So it's not unusual for an IT person to be called in to explain something in layman's terms to an ambassador, because we're not a large organization abroad, because it's expensive. So we need our IT people to not just be the geeky kind, they have to be broad. We also have international English language programs, medical health, we have clinics, we have psychiatrists, we have doctors, nurse practitioners, office management we have as well, doing the clerical work, and finally law enforcement and security. You've probably heard the term diplomatic security. That's who they are, and they have agents who are the people who are responsible for all the security for all the Americans at that mission, including family members, and then they have some other roles as well. Next slide, please. So we talked about the jobs, we talked about the Department of State. Now we're going to talk a little bit about why do people even join? And, oh, by the way, some of these pictures I've taken, some are just kind of canned pictures. This is a real picture, and this is one of the few things I've seen that looks just like on TV as it does in real life. This is our operations center, and it's open, it never closes. And this is where whenever something's happening, it's buzzing, and it's a kind of an electric environment, because there's always something happening in the world, because the world never closes. And this is our brains, where information is just going back and forth all the time. Next slide, please. So some common motivations for joining the U.S. Foreign Service may be supporting U.S. interests and security initiatives. Different people like to support U.S. interests, and they have different ways of doing it. Some people will want to join the Peace Corps. Some people teach for America. Some people may be military oriented. Well, we offer a great career by supporting U.S. interests and security initiatives in the U.S. Foreign Service. So we're an alternative. Being part of a unique community. We definitely are a clique. There's no doubt about it. Like I said, there aren't that many of us numbers wise. So we get to know each other. That's kind of a cool thing. I remember I was walking through the airport in Buenos Aires, and I saw a guy with a bag, a duffel bag that had the U.S. Department of State logo on it. And so I pulled him over and started talking to him. And before you knew it, we had a bunch of people we knew in common. So that's a fun thing about it. Public service, we talked about the consular work. A lot of people like to be able to help others, and trust me, when Americans overseas, many times they don't really speak the language that well, and they're in distress, they really appreciate the help they get from our people. Career-long training and academic growth. We're very big on academic training. We have our own school called Foreign Service Institute. They teach language, but they also teach the work itself. We call that the trade craft. So every time someone's getting ready to go overseas, they will get a list of classes they need to take to make sure that they're going to go overseas ready to do their job. And speaking of jobs, the job challenge. Whatever you're doing in the States may seem challenging, but imagine being overseas where you may have to communicate in your second or even third language, and the rules are different over there. So we definitely are challenging careers. You will not be bored. Another thing for those who are more on the side is being on the front line of service. I always tell everybody, if you turn on the news at 3 o'clock in the morning, you see something exploding or blowing up, chances are the first person who's going to be there is going to be someone from our embassy or consulate. We're all over the world. We're usually the ones communicating back to our operations center, and then the other agencies are getting information from us, at least at the beginning. Hopefully, I saw there was a little bit of a slowdown. Hopefully I'm coming through okay. Last thing is family or lifestyle interest. This was actually big to me because I joined been working for about 17 years in the private world, and you can have a fun life overseas because Uncle Sam pays for a lot of things, including housing, shipping your car over, schools for your kids. So you can have a very fun international lifestyle in the U.S. Foreign Service. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through this, but these are just some of the places I've been in the U.S. service. So some of these were as long as 3 years, others maybe a week. But it was a great experience in each one of these places, and I came away with the story for each one. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the paths, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit so we have time for questions, but we're going to talk through how does someone join the Foreign Service. Next slide, please. So the hiring process is actually a test-in process for our officers. It starts with an officer test that's taken at Pearson VUE, a private testing center. And if somebody passes that test, it goes on to a qualifications evaluation panel, which basically means we can expect anywhere from 50 to 60% of people to pass the officer test. So then we have to decide who we're going to call in for interviews, and that would be our QEP who makes that decision. Of course, government, so we don't call it interviews, we call it oral assessment. And our oral assessment is pretty much an interview. It's about 5-6 hour day where people are in Washington and they go through a process with others who are at the same stage as they are in trying to make a decision whether or not we want to pursue them as becoming Foreign Service officers. They have to go through their medical and security clearances, and that's usually what slows things down because they have to get the security clearances and slow it down from anywhere from like 3 or 4 to maybe even months to maybe even 8, 9, 10 months. So that depends on one's background, how long it takes to get those clearances. Once the clearances are set, then the entire package, the applicant's package, goes before a suitability review panel. And this panel is really no different than an admissions panel at a college. They look holistically at everything about this candidate and make a final decision, yes or no, do we want to hire them? If we want to hire them, what they then do is put them in rank order based on their scores on the oral assessment. So if someone gets, let's say, a score of 7.8, they would be higher than someone who got a 7.7. And they do it by your career track. So the management people have their own list, consular their own list, and then finally when the orientation class comes up, all they do is go to those lists and say, we need 7 management people or 15 PD people. And they literally go down those lists and pull people in based on that register. Next slide, please. So for the specialists, the process is a little bit different. It's very similar, but it starts with the application at usajobs.gov. I would encourage everybody to go to usajobs.gov, set up an account there, and be notified whenever something that interests you pops up. Even if you're a freshman or sophomore and you have a few years before you're going to be graduating, it's a good idea to do this because you'll start to see the announcements for the jobs you think you might be interested in, and you start to see what they're looking for. So you can tailor what you're studying or what you're doing as far as work or internships, because you're seeing what they're looking for. So I encourage everybody to set up those accounts. Otherwise, the process is very similar, except for one thing. When they get to their oral assessment, they have to take a competency exam. So people who are finance are going to have to take an exam in finance. People who are construction engineering are going to have to take an exam in engineering. So that's a big between the specialist process and the generalist process. Next slide, please. And now we'll talk student programs. I'm going to start with the student programs that have our current deadlines, and then I'll go to those whose deadlines have already passed for 2021. Next slide, please. So one internship, or it's actually a fellowship, not an internship, is our Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship we call FATE. You can find out more information at fatefellowship.org. And this is one fellowship that is trying to attract IT personnel, and also we welcome applications from women and members of minority groups that have been underrepresented in the foreign service and or have strong financial need. Next slide, please. So this program is basically for students who are entering their junior year in the fall of 2021, so they currently be sophomores, or they're currently seniors, they graduate this spring, and then they would start a master's degree. So the FATE Fellowship is for 2 years. Those 2 years can be your junior, senior year of undergrad, or they can be a 2 years master's degree, and it has to be in an IT-related field. So if you're undergrad, you're going to have to be studying IT. But let's say you majored in, but you've decided, you know, I think I want to go to IT to get my master's degree. Then you could still compete because your master's degree would be where you get your technical training. You have to be U.S. citizens between the ages of 20 and 59, get a medical clearance and a top secret level security clearance, have a minimum 3.2 GPA to apply and maintain that. And again, also students who are currently finishing their second year in junior or community college who are going on to the 4-year school, they would be eligible to apply for this. Next slide, please. So the FATE Fellowship basically provides $37,500 annually for tuition, room, board, books, fees, and also a stipend. The internships they have are separately paid, and they do 2 internships, one in DC after the first year, and then after they finish the program, they do another internship abroad before they actually start their 5-year commitment as an information management specialist with the U.S. Foreign Service. While it is a 5-year commitment, experience has taught us people tend to stay in a lot longer than 5 years. They usually serve full careers because it's a good deal. And the application for this one closes on February 1 of 2021. Next slide, please. Now, the other is the Wrangle Summer Enrichment Program, and this is a 6-week summer program that is for undergraduate students, so they're pretty much learning about international affairs and careers. Again, it welcomes applications from members of minority groups that have been historically underrepresented in the foreign service, women, and those with financial need. At the time of the application deadline, students must be full-time undergraduate students who are U.S. citizens of at least the sophomore status. So that means by the application deadline, February 9, they have to currently be sophomores or higher. We call them scholars, and the scholars live at Howard University during the summer. They attend 2 courses, and these are our undergraduate courses, so Georgia State may offer credit for those courses. They also have a program the program covers the cost of tuition, travel, housing, and they get a stipend. I haven't seen what it is this year, but last year it was $3,200. And the best thing about this, there isn't any service commitment. So if someone finishes this program, they don't have a 5-year commitment. Now, the reality is, if someone finishes this program, they're in very good shape to compete for a fellowship when they graduate, which would be an honor to the foreign. Next slide, please. Other student opportunities include the Wrangle Graduate Fellowship Program and also the Pickering Program. So these programs, you can find out more at wrangleprogram.org and pickeringfellowship.org. But these programs are programs that pay for your master's degree, they provide internships, and they provide a path into the Foreign Service as officers. So one of those 5 areas. So these are excellent programs and they're extremely competitive. The U.S. Foreign Service is very focused on diversity because we want to ensure that our embassies and consulates abroad reflect the diversity of the United States. So these programs are opportunities for people to get in if they really don't have a lot of experience in the Foreign Service, but they're outstanding students and leaders, then they can hopefully compete for these fellowships and they provide entrees directly into the Foreign Service. The State Department Internship Program is our standard unpaid internship program. This is for domestic assignments or international internships. You can find out more about these at usajobs.gov or careers.state.gov. For summer 2021, the deadline is closed, and the reason is we close so early is because everybody has to get their security clearances. The next one is the Virtual Student Federal Service Internship, VSF. And this is a little bit deceptive program. They open July 1 and close the end of July. And so what I would urge everybody to do is register at usajobs.gov because during the summer, you're not thinking about applying, but that's really when you have to apply. These internships are great internships because they require 10 hours a week working on projects, but you can do it from anywhere. You can do it from your parents' house, from your dorm, from wherever you are. As a matter of fact, we have some interns who aren't even in the United States, but they're Americans, and they are doing internships where they are getting project-oriented work, and this is very helpful to us as well as them. Our paid programs are Pathways internships, and people should always look at usajobs.gov to find out more about these. Pathways are not just Department of State. So while ours may close, there are other agencies you should look at as well because they can provide opportunities as pathways and interns. And the last one I'll mention is our US FSIP. These are basically for current sophomores or juniors with demonstrated financial need. 1/3 of the determination is demonstrated financial need, but this is also an excellent program that includes 2 paid summer internships. And again, you're being polished and prepared to compete in the Foreign Service for a career. And if we go to our last slide, you can get in touch with me at dirsouth@state.gov. I encourage everybody to read through careers.state.gov and also go to usajobs.gov for profile, and also we'll put in a resume, and this will help you see the type of resumes that the federal government tends to look for. You can take down a screen share now if you like. And you also put in notifications in usajobs.gov so you won't miss deadlines. And with that, we're going to start the questions while I drink some water.
So if anyone has any questions, we got a good sized group here today. I don't know, Caroline, did anything come up in chat?
No.
Okay. Please feel free to unmute yourself. It's a decent sized group, but I think we can probably manage that way. Or if you just prefer to have Caroline or I ask your question, you're welcome to put that in chat as well.
So I talk kind of fast through a lot of things. A few things I do want to emphasize, so I'll just watch for questions. Let's talk internships. I always tell students, don't get too focused on the Department of State. At this stage, you want to cast a wide umbrella, a net, and see what you can get. So if you say, I'm only going to apply for Department of State opportunities, you might not get it, but you might be able to get one at FBI, or you might be able to get one at Treasury. And the reality is 50% of what you're going to learn during an internship is transferable to all the other agencies. So think the agencies are doing the same thing 50% of the time, but what they're supporting changes from agency to agency to agency. So if someone can get an internship, I met a student, he had an internship at IRS, and he was very disappointed because he didn't get one at Department of State. And I said, but this is going to prepare you because you're going to gather so much information with the IRS that will help build your resume. So you might be able to get an internship your last year at Department of State or somewhere else, but it just stays on your resume because it truly is helpful. It's building to help you learn more about foreign service in general. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
Alan, you mentioned the FSO, the exam that
Yes.
people have to take. I've had a number of questions around that. Can you talk a little bit about that exam? How many times you can take it? I know it's difficult.
It's a challenge, but really the challenge is getting through the entire process. And I always tell people it's kind of like taking the SAT. First time you take it, it's hard. But then if you take it a second time because you didn't pass, well, you tend to do a little bit better. The record I've ever met is 14. I actually had a classmate of mine, and for what it's worth, he was a PhD. So it's you have to be all those 13 dimensions, and he was a little lopsided. And so he was struggling with the oral communications part of the requirements. So he would get up to the interviews over and over and over, and then couldn't quite do well at that last stage. But my point is basically that it's not unusual for people to have to take it more than once. It took me 2 times. And the reason was I had been in the business world, and in the business world, you write like bullets. Every sentence is information you can use. Well, I passed the multiple choice, but I didn't do well on the essay. So I contacted the local diplomat in residence, and he said, no, you have to write like you're writing a senior thesis or something. They want a nice flowing prose. And I said, oh, okay, I got it. So I wrote like I was writing a paper for school, and hot knife through butter. The rest of it was not hard at all for me. So essentially, we usually have a pass rate of around 50 to 60% on that first part of it, and that's just pass fail. And then when you get into the oral part, that's where they actually give you a grade. And that oral part, you can find out detail and what's involved in it at careers.state.gov. But basically what they do is bring in a group of 8 candidates at the same time, and they have individual interview portions. They have other portions where they have you do things as a team, and they're pretty much evaluating those 13 dimensions throughout the entire process. I see a question popped up. Let's see. About policies, special difficulty within channel. So I think the question about, I was wondering when those in charge of making decisions, how do they make their policy decisions? Well, I'm interpreting that correctly. Basically, remember I talked about those political and econ officers sending information back to Washington? Well, there's someone in Washington who's receiving that information. And that person's job is to look for commonalities. So we call them desk officers. So let's say that we're in the Andean region. We might have a political officer sending information back to DC about what's going on in Colombia, another one from Venezuela, another one in Peru. Well, that one desk officer back in DC is reading all this and seeing, oh my goodness, I see some commonality here of what's going on. And that responsibility is then to find out more, share this information with the supervisors, and that's how they start gathering information to make decisions about how are we going to deal with this. So what's going on in Venezuela, when the Venezuelans are leaving the country, they're going to Colombia, it not only affects our relationship with Venezuela, it also affects the US relationship with Colombia. So now we know we have to make some decisions maybe about funding that we're going to provide to Colombia because they're getting a lot of refugees. Believe it or not, refugees into Colombia is a major issue for us. People don't think about that. But many times they're coming from Venezuela or some other unstable part of Latin America. So the policy, as the information flows, that's how the final decisions are going to be made on the policy.
Thank you. We also have another question asking, are there possibilities for someone in their 30s with a graduate degree and speaks fluent Urdu with considerable international living experiences to get in?
Yes, yes, yes. And So let's talk a little bit about this and also about majors. The median age, no, the mean age for our entry-level foreign services, last I saw, was about 32, and the median age was around 28 or 29. So basically, we get a lot of people who've been out working a while, either in the government or they may have been military, people who are Peace Corps, who put in their time and service in the Peace Corps. We also get people who are in graduate school and then they decide to go on. We get a lot of military who do 20 years and then they decide to apply. So the point I'm trying to make is that people are at different stages throughout their development. And so wherever they are, what the assessors do is really look at how good they are at those 13 dimensions. So someone who might just be right out of college they might be someone who has a lot of potential, but it's going to be a challenge for them because as they go through those 13 dimensions, they have to demonstrate that they're strong in those areas. Whereas that same person 3 years later, it's going to be a lot easier for them to demonstrate because they've had some experiences that they can point to as proof of those 13 dimensions. So to answer your question, the specific question, yes, all those things sound very positive. I always tell people you're not behind the curve if you feel like you're too old. The oldest person I met who joined, I think, was 50, but it could be 59, up to 59. But what is very common is, like I said, people who are in the military and do 20 years, that's actually fairly common. The other thing I would say is language. So many people think, oh, I speak 3 or 4 languages, and that's really a great benefit. My answer is language skills will never hurt you. If you have them, it can only help you. With that said, if you don't have them and you demonstrate you're good at those 13 dimensions, our attitude will teach you the language. So I think sometimes people get a little too focused on the language, and really we're looking for all 13 of those skills. Now there are target languages, so if people speak Arabic or Mandarin and they're able to pass the test, then that can actually give them benefit. They get what's called points, kind of like veterans points, and that means that they can move a little bit higher in that register than their score. So that can get them in a little bit easier. They can leapfrog over someone else. Now, the only catch is they're going to use that Arabic. So if they got in because they got extra points for Arabic, they're going to use that Arabic. They're not going to get in and think they're going to Brazil. They're going to an Arabic-speaking country. What else you have?
We have a hand raised. Nasrin, did you want to ask a question?
Yes. My question pertains to the part where you're discussing how you should apply to different agencies and departments. So my question is, how do you decide which agency or department is the best fit for you?
Excellent question. And here's my answer. You don't care about the agency at this stage. Yeah, when you're undergrad, especially if you're a freshman or sophomore, get the internship based on your interests. So let's take a real life example. Let's say you're kind of a financial person. You know, you want to do something kind of sort of quantitative. So that could be some finance work. It could be accounting. It could be policy analysis that's quantitative. So what you do is you go to USA Jobs and don't focus on the agency, focus on that work. So if you can find finance and transportation, or you find it at the CIA, you're still getting finance work. And again, that helps you start being more competitive because now you not only have that finance on, but you truly do learn things. When you're in these internships, it's like fire hose with water. You're gathering so much information, figuring out where the bathroom is, and they're telling you to go write this memo. So you will be more prepared the next time you apply because now you have some of those experiences. I have a daughter who's a sophomore in college right now, and she only applied to 2. And I said, are you crazy? You need to be applying to a lot more than that. And she applied to that virtual program and got one with ODNI, one of the intelligence agencies. So you cast that wide net at this stage. Don't worry about narrowing it down until you're talking about you're looking for your final job.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
We have another question. For someone who has a GPA below a 3.0, what are their prospects like when it comes to graduate fellowships or becoming a foreign service officer or specialist?
As far as fellowships, those 3.2 requirements are hard. So if you don't have 3.2, that's like the minimum cutoff. I've been on a couple of boards where they've chosen people, and usually I'd say on average, GPAs are like 3.7, 3.8 on average. And those people who are 3.2s who get the fellowships tend to be really outstanding in other things. So they might not have the high GPA, but two things they have. One is that they started slow and showed progress. So someone starts as a freshman with like a 2.8, but by the time they're a junior, they're up to a 3.8. That average GPA might be 3.3, but they see that that student's maturing, that student's getting better. So that's something that catches their eye. The other thing is, remember, we're looking at all 13 dimensions. So if someone doesn't have the strongest GPA, however, they are doing so many other things of value, then that can help them a lot. So keep in mind, if you go to usajobs.gov, every application has what's called a vacancy announcement, and it goes through excruciating detail telling you exactly what's required. So that's it. That is the Bible. No matter what anybody says, whatever's in that vacancy announcement, that is the minimum. And you can't really argue yourself or try to make a case if you don't meet the minimum. One last, when it comes to competing through the Foreign Service Officer test, GPA doesn't matter because now you're looking for a full-time job and they're just focused on those 13 dimensions more than anything else. So GPA is really not going to make a difference.
Alan, we had another question about how does it work in terms of when administrations change at the federal level every 4 or 8 years? How does that impact foreign service and the jobs that all of you do?
So the overwhelming majority of our jobs are career jobs, meaning that you join and you serve. That's it. We do have some jobs that we call political jobs, and those tend to be more higher level, like Western European embassies. A lot of times their ambassadors are people who are political appointees. So they're in and out with that administration. But anybody whose career serves the Constitution and the mission. So it really doesn't matter who's in the administration. That's who they serve at that time. So they're serving the US government. And as far as one's political beliefs, that's your political belief, but your job, just like the military, is to serve the US government. So that the change is, we have change all the time just because of the nature of our business. For every 2 to 3 years, you're picking up and going somewhere. But as far as administrations go, it's pretty much just, here's the new mission. So a year ago, here's what was important to us. Remember I mentioned those policy issues? That changes. You read it and you say, okay, and you just move on to the next one.
It has come up before when I've been meeting with students who are considering this, the lifestyle that an FSO goes through, as you were just mentioning, you're moving every 2 or 3 years. Can you talk a little bit about that and how people cope with that, how they build lives around that kind of transient lifestyle, so to speak?
Sure, that's a very good question. And what I always tell people, it has to be a lifestyle you like. So we have a lot of civil servants in DC who are very, very good employees, exceptionally good at what they do, but they don't like to pick up and go. So they've chosen to be civil servants. Then you have other people who, like me, I'm ready to go every 2 years anyway. I could be happy where I am, but I just got bored. I want to do something different. And that's just built in. So a lot of it really depends on your personality. We leave enough wiggle room so you make the decisions in your career. So when you start, you have your first 2 tours are normally 2 years each, and you have limited control over where you're going to be assigned. So the first tour, if there are 70 people in your class, there will be 70 jobs. So you know you're getting something from that list. We kind of negotiate it with you. So we sit and talk and say, okay, what do you think about Bogota? How about Spain? And then ultimately we make the assignment based on our needs. The second tour, now there might be 300 jobs for 220 people applying, and you control it yourself. So you have to pitch yourself, present yourself to get the one you want.
You still with us, Alan?
So it's not unusual for people not to get their full, who say, one thing that's very common is you never touch ground in the same country. So some people take the attitude, if I've been to Italy, if I've been to Rome, I'm not going to Milan because I've already been to Italy. I need to go to Latin America. I need to go to Sub-Saharan Africa. So I've seen people with that mindset. And I've seen other people who say, I want to spend my entire career after those first 2 tours, I'm staying in Latin America. And you can do that because there are enough countries in Latin America to do that. So a lot of it really depends on your interest, what's important to you, and your lifestyle. And there's a lot of information internally for you to make these decisions.
We have one more quick question I see in chat, Caroline, unless you see additional ones. What is the requirement regarding age to start a career?
20.
Okay. Caroline, in the time we're remaining, are there any questions? Did you see any?
Yes.
Okay.
How can we prepare for the FSOT and build quantitative analysis skills? And are there civil service careers that still correlate with international affairs?
So yes and yes. You go to careers.state.gov and click on the FSOT, how to prepare. Trust me, you will find, it's like going to collegeboard.org. You will find everything from pamphlets to explain information to you to sample test questions. So go through that detail and start to read up on it. As far as civil service, yes, the jobs in civil service are more administrative. However, we do have a lot of jobs in civil service where they do policy type work, and it is not unusual for people to be in the civil service and then compete through the test and process. We do have a few conversions for people who are civil service to go to foreign service, but that's probably like 1%. So I always tell people don't plan on that. But again, if you're working in an office and the people in the office next to you are foreign service, you know, it makes it a lot easier because every day you're doing work supporting the foreign service. So you're preparing yourself just by doing your civil service work.
I think we have time for one more question. Does anybody have one last question they'd like to ask? If not, is there anything, Mr. Dubose, is there anything that you would like to share?
Yes, I just put my address in there, dir.south@state.gov. If anybody would like to talk to me during office hours, please shoot me an email there and I will sit and talk to you for about a half hour. You can give me a call with an appointment and we can talk through anything you think is kind of unusual to you or any specific questions you have. I will say this, the very first thing I'm going to ask you is, did you go to careers.state.gov? And the reason is you'll start to understand, and if you don't go there, then you won't necessarily understand the context of my answers. So by going there, it'll prepare you to even know what to ask and understand what I'm saying.
Fantastic. On behalf of all of us, thank you so much for this terrific presentation packed with information. And hopefully everyone, the students and the participants here were able to get those links that Caroline posted. What I will also do is shoot you guys out that list of links so that you'll have that accessible. And you'll be able to do all that exploring and digging and really get a sense of the different avenues and programs and opportunities at the State Department. So thank you very much, Mr. DeBose. And also the students, just so you are aware, you're going to be getting an email link that I think is going to be coming from Diana, who you've already received multiple correspondences from. And this is the first time, as you all know, very unique year, first time we've done this virtually. So we really welcome your input and your feedback, and we thank you very much for taking some time this afternoon to join us. If you are jumping into another program that should start, you probably should be able to join that at this point now, but the 2 o'clock programs will start, or sessions will start very shortly. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Caroline, for your support. And everybody, good luck. Go change the world.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye, everybody. Happy